It's that time of year again, the Standish release, and we're looking today at the 2020s. It's fair to say that these could be looked at as the tiny 20s, tiny in terms of yields, not in terms of body and concentration, which we'll see in a moment. 2020 was down in some areas as much as 70% in yield. And so that's a very bad news story for us if we're looking to buy the wines. But certainly it's good in that it makes them scarce and has certainly concentrated what is in the glass. They had some, they being the Barossa Zone vignerons, and we can extend that out to the rest of South Australia, but in this case we're just looking at the Barossa Zone. The Barossa Zone vignerons really had some trouble early in the season around flowering and fruit set, which drastically reduced yields going into the season. Compounding that, 2020 was the extension of 2019 in terms of drought conditions and low rainfalls. So what we really have are heavily concentrated wines packed into far smaller quantities. So to say that these are exuberant expressions of their normal selves is an understatement to the max. When we look at the way that these wines are made, so these are all hand-picked, wild fermented in open-top fermenters and matured in French oak, around 20% new for 18 to 22 months, depending on the vintage. So if it's a tannic vintage, they might come out a little bit earlier. If it's a gentler, softer vintage, they might stay in a little bit longer. And these are judgments that Dan makes later in the season, later in the maturing season. So I'm going to go through each of these wines now and explain to you what they taste like, a little bit about how each of them are made, the vineyard areas, which is very important, and the first vintages that we ever saw of these wines, because I think that it's nice to get a picture of perhaps how old the wine legacy is and maybe what we can start to look for on market, because it's always cool to look at older wines against their newer counterparts. So in wine number one, this is the 2020 Lamella. So Lamella is famously from the Eden Valley. It's from the Angus family, which is Hutton Vale Farm. And this is the wine that everyone goes mental for. And it's excellent, don't get me wrong. It's excellent like all of the others. But it's different in that it is from Eden. So Eden is quite literally up the road, up the hill. It's higher elevation, it's cooler. This is the last pick of these wines, and at that point the stalks are really lignified, which is important because this is 100% whole bunch, different to the others. The first vintage of this wine was quite recent. This is 2015, and I think it's probably fair to say that this is the elegant, spicy, even a little bit floral wine of the lineup. I opened these yesterday. It's probably very important to tell you this. I opened them yesterday at midday. So it's 24 hours. It's a full 24-hour cycle. And I took notes on them immediately as I opened them. I'm going to take notes after this tasting, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow at lunchtime, because the picture of evolution of these wines is really important, not just to the quality of them from a points perspective, because that really does come into it. How they age, how they evolve really does affect the overall point that we as reviewers and critics will give them, but you can tell a lot about a wine from the way it goes on the bench. And as you know, I'm very anxious about oxygen. I gas wines often. I'll open them, gas them, and look at them again the following day, the following week. But with these wines, I have been strongly encouraged to try and ease out of my anxiety in terms of oxygen and just let them open up. So that's what I am doing, and that's what I am confident doing with these wines. And so that is the picture that we've got currently in terms of being open. So this is a really, really beautiful wine, and I'm smiling as I smell it because it's really incredibly pretty on the nose. It's floral, this kind of spring florals, and I always go to Earl Grey tea. It's got black tea, but it's also got orange zest curls, and it's granitic and mineral, and that's absolutely very definitely from the Eden Valley area. I mean, there's literally protrusions of rock that kind of like burst out of the ground. Would be an absolute bugger to farm up there, but it looks incredible. It's quite unique, and the wines have a real rockiness to them, and that's what this has. It's very, very, very pretty, and every time I drink it, I understand intimately why it has the cult following that it does. The really wonderful thing is, I mean, I'm talking about it being pretty, but it's not soft. I mean, it's got really firm tannins that kind of are pliable and shapely, and they really create line and length through the palate, and they create the gutter guards within which the fruit and the flowers and the rocks can all kind of flow. It's got a really lovely, as I've already mentioned, Earl Grey black tea kind of character through the finish. This is a really wonderfully beautiful, elegant wine, which is more elegant today than it was yesterday. So tomorrow could be a whole new picture. The second wine is the Standish. So this is from the Laycock family vineyard in Greenock. If you need more information on the areas within the Barossa, there's a really great project that has been undertaken by the Barossa Wine and Grape Association called Barossa Grounds, and I really encourage you to go and have a look at it online. There is so much information about soils, elevations, vineyards, growing areas, and how all of those things affect the way the wines taste. And when we're looking at it in the context of Syrah or Shiraz, that's a really, really important foundation of information that you should have. So if you haven't already had a look at that project, the Barossa Grounds is invaluable. It's been really useful for me, apart from going there and seeing the place and feeling it and kicking the dirt and smelling the air and all those things. It's been a really, really important part of my understanding of why these wines taste precisely the way they do. So back to the wine. Where this is 100% whole bunch, this was 30% whole bunch. The first vintage of this wine was in 1999. I was only just starting high school at that time. This is often for me the one that is really savoury and spicy, and I often go to Middle Eastern spices like Ras El Hanout and torched cinnamon and star anise and all of these, even saffron. I mean, all of these kind of spicy, dry, toasted, exotic spices that we get. But when you add that to the fruit here is really red, and I don't mean red in a sweet way. I mean red in like a blood roasted beetroot, red gravel, salted heirloom tomato kind of way. This is a really fantastically distinct wine, and to me, I suppose out of all of them, maybe perhaps with the exception of Schubert's, this really is quintessential Barossa Valley. This is what I think of when I drink Barossa Valley Shiraz. This is what I hope for when I drink Barossa Valley Shiraz, because it's got, I think the region and the concept of Barossa Valley Shiraz can really be quite maligned in that they're just big, full-bodied, tannic reds, and that's absolute crap. The wines are nuanced and layered and long. The best that is packed with flavour and spice and levels of spice as well. So you can really get this kind of kaleidoscopic experience from the greatest Barossa Shiraz. There's just a lot going on, and you should never just write them off as being big fruit bombs. It's upsetting to hear that. When people say that, it drives me wild. This is just everything I've said. It's awesome. I love it. Yeah, that hasn't moved since yesterday. This has evolved quite definitely. It's much silkier today. This hasn't moved. So this will be very interesting to look at tomorrow. The Relic. So the Relic is from the Hongel family in Krondorf. You know Hongel because you know Ian Hongel, who's the winemaker for Torbreck. They're a great family in the Barossa, and Dan has been working with the Hongels for 12 years for this wine. First vintage was in 2002. This has Viognier in it. It's the only wine in the lineup with another grape. This is 1% skins co-fermented. Viognier is potent. You can perceive it in these tiny quantities. It's the star of the show. So when you start looking at wines that have 3, 5, 8, 10% Viognier, these are very, very heavily impacted by the Viognier grape. And so characters that you can associate with Viognier are like spring flowers, apricots. The addition of Viognier to a red wine enhances the colour. It makes it look brighter. it impacts the tannins. It makes the mouth feel kind of slippery and slinky and velvety, and everything flows, and it's really kind of slippery. It's a really wonderful addition to red wine, but you just got to do it judiciously, and this has been done judiciously. So there's only 15 to 20% whole bunch in this as compared to 30 and 100. I'm going to come out and say it. This is the best Relic. This is the best Standish Relic ever. It manages to do something that's very difficult, and that is, if you imagine Viognier as like a bunch of springs and coils that just kind of like bounce around out of the glass like slinkies down a set of stairs, you know what I mean? Like there's all this kind of buoyancy, and movement can be very distracting. You try a Viognier Shiraz or Shiraz Viognier, and often you think, wow, it's beautiful, it's seductive, and it's floral, and it's all this stuff, but really you're just getting swept away by the beauty of the Viognier. But in this case, I think because of the concentration due to lower yields and the warmer year, I think what we have here is a real compaction of the Viognier into the fruit, and what it is allowing is the fruit, the Shiraz fruit, to come through, and it's savoury. It's got like bacon fat, and it's a bit meaty, and it's substantial. And when you add that to the really beautiful, pretty floral things, all the seduction from the Viognier, you get this really cool, like yin-yang wine that's just a pleasure and a joy to drink. And yesterday, when I opened this was the wine I was like, wow. I mean, that's distinct for its Lamella-ness, but this was like, wow, we're drinking something amazing here. And today, that feeling is only compounded, and I can't wait to look at it again tomorrow. I had a really great experience last year at a wine show. Wine show dinners are really good. All the judges bring interesting and exciting wines, and one of my fellow judges brought a 2010 Chateau d'Ampuis, and I brought the 2019 Relic, and we put them on side by side. And the beauty of that comparison was the Chateau d'Ampuis was absolutely unapologetically itself. It was in perfect condition and a beautiful shining example of the style. And then we had the Relic, which is everything that we love about the Relic. It was unapologetically Australian. It was clearly Australian. But when you get something that good, you go, oh, it can only be a handful of producers. And it was just awesome. It was really awesome. And to me, it really reconfirmed why this wine is a great example of Shiraz Viognier. It's not, I mean, I always think it, but it's really cool to see it side by side. So, yeah, it was just an excellent example. And this, if anything, kind of it's like the vintage conditions have just carved off all the fat and just really condensed this wine into the essence of itself. And I think that that's really exciting. I'm not sure what my favourite is yet. I'm still making my mind up. But that's a really hot contender. Moving finally into the fourth wine, this is the Schubert's Theorem. So this is from Rohnfeld Road in Marananga. 70% whole bunch, so 70, 15 to 20, 30 and 100%. This is the only wine in the collection that sees any other kind of fermentation vessels. So where all of these are 100% French oak, the northeastern section of this vineyard goes into concrete, and that helps to retain some of the blue fruit characters in this wine. I think it's very easy to say that this wine is tannic and dark and brooding and black, and I always think of it either like Darth Vader or like a Black Panther. It's got this kind of prowling, slinking kind of way about it. But this year, to me, there's two things that really stand out about it. One is the tannins. They're fine, they're chalky, they're a little bit gritty, they're a little bit chewy, but they're really prominent in the mouth and in a really, really good way, because that's why we drink red wine, remember, for the tannins. We like tannins. We like red wine, we like tannins. They come together. We like them. This has got gorgeous, gorgeous tannins. But within that shell, I suppose, is a really pure core of fruit. The fruit in this wine is very, very elegant, and it needs to be viewed that way, because I think if you look at it and you're like, oh, it's going to be a brooding, big, muscular wine, you're going to miss out on so much that this has to offer. And I think we're all influenced by external inputs like information that we see or things that we hear or whatever. And if you've ever been to the Standish cellar door, and I'm sure that most of you have, Dan has a little selection of glass vessels with dirt in them from these vineyards. And again, that leads back to the information I was telling you that you should seek out, which is around the Barossa subregions and areas and Barossa subregion and areas. But the dirt in this vineyard is like sparkly black. So it's really, really distinct. And that really colours my impression of this wine. I always think to like the galaxy and universes of flavour and endless length and infinity. This wine is just that for me. And this year, I suppose, it's like it on steroids, and it's really easy to see. I mean, I think actually a really good point about this collection is that when you have a year that's as concentrated as this, it really highlights the differences and the identities of each of these cuvées. And I think that's really important, because what we want to do is we want to understand the inherent qualities of each of these areas, each of these vineyards, why they taste the way that they do. And there's no better way to see that than in a year where everything is very condensed and compacted. 2020 is that year. So yeah, it's a real bugger for us in terms of buying as drinkers, because they're going to be difficult, I would suggest, to get hold of. It's not really that different from any other year because none of them are made in huge quantities, but it is a shame. So looking forward to 2021, I mentioned last year in the 2019 video that I had just been in the Barossa and spent a morning with Dan talking to him about vintages and whatnot. The 2021 vintage 1 year on is now perhaps even better than we could have hoped when we were in the midst of it last year. 21 across Eastern Australia, I'm going to go out that far, was cool and elegant and excellent. And we can expect really, really, really high quality wines almost across the board. And that is reds and whites. And in the context of the Barossa, they had this awful run of yields in 19 and 20, which was heartbreaking, and we're in the midst of the heartbreak now. But 21 was gorgeous season from start to finish. They had great flowering, great fruit set, which equals great yields, really wonderful quality, no heat spikes. It was just a wonderful, wonderful year with plentiful quality, thank God. So I guess that's not really going to help any of us because we're going to buy them just the same, but it will give you an idea of, I suppose, the style of the wines. I think they're going to be cooler and spicier and lighter and more structural, I suppose. These are structural in a different way. But yeah, I can't wait to see that. And then 22, I mean, we're really far too early to tell. But what I can say is that from the people I've spoken to in the Barossa and McLaren Vale so far about 2022 and its qualities, the general consensus is it's no 2021, but it's a pretty bloody good follow-up. So we're very happy about that, and we'll see what that means for Standish. Hopefully we'll see another cuvée. I mean, we are missing the Andelmond this year and last year. The last one was in 18. I mean, that would be really great. I love that wine. I've always loved that wine. And back in the day, there was another wine that we missed that we haven't seen for a while. Who knows? Who knows? I haven't asked Dan. I don't actually want him to tell me. If he tells me, I might tell you, and then everyone will know. So, as ever, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It means that when I put out videos like this, you'll be the first to know. And in terms of timing, I'm really releasing this video very close to Dan's release time. So hopefully you do get to see it before the opportunity presents itself and then disappears to buy the wines. Make sure you're drinking good wine in life. It's too short to be bothering with anything else. I am putting tasting notes and details in the comments below, links to my website with full tasting notes if you want to know more about the wines. I'm also in that going to link, as I always do, to the Barossa Grounds project if you can't find it by Googling, although I'm sure that you can, but the information will be there if you need it. Thanks for watching. enjoy the wines. Love to hear what you think of them. You can contact me on Instagram or via the comments here, and we can get stuck into some heated debate about how good these are.